You know how you go into a YouTube video and you're like, I want to get straight to this. I'm going to skip the intro. And today, I'm so excited to do this mock draft. I'm skipping the intro. We're going right to it.
I have decided to skip college and take my talent to the NBA.
I've been waiting for this, and free agency's the most fun and one of the most fun time of the year to do mock drafts. So let's start this thing up. Hope you guys are doing really well, though, might I add. Let's get into it. The Tennessee Titans at number one. What do they do after free agency? I think it's setting up to be pretty clear. As for the Tennessee Titans, they're going to be drafting a quarterback early in this draft. Also, other areas, they're going to have to add another wide receiver. You got Van Jefferson coming in here. Running back, tight end, they're good to go there, I think, for right now in terms of early in the draft. They need another guard. And then they did bring in Dan Moore, so tackle situation should be good to go. Secondary is good to go. They brought in Xavier Woods in the back end to go along with Amani Hooker. Linebacker room's fine. Defensive interior's fine. They also brought Sebastian Joseph Day back. Their edge room needs help. So I think two obvious picks here are quarterback or edge rusher. It's Abdul Carter, it's Cam Ward, or Shedeur Sanders if you're high on Shedeur Sanders too, which I like Shedeur. We're going Cam Ward, though, here at the number one overall pick until I see more about their quarterback situation. I got to get somebody. And for Cleveland, it's a similar situation. I think quarterback, even though they traded for Kenny Pickett, I'm not ready to say that he's going to be the franchise quarterback there. Deshaun Watson's just there strictly for the money. He'll be gone very soon once they can release him. Wide receivers, still possibly an area they look at. Tight end too. Running backs, an area they need to look at. Offensive line-wise, I would say guard is still developing a guy behind Joel Bitonio. I do think their attack room is going to be set going into next season. It could be a little up and down there. Cornerback room, I think they'll add somewhere on day 2, maybe early day 3. Safety position seems like a need as well that they're going to have to add in the draft there or in free agency still. Linebacker set. Interior defense line, they also need to add here. This could be a day 2 pick very easily. Even maybe Mason Graham if they figure out the quarterback situation. Edge rusher should be good to go now with Myles Garrett back. They brought Joe Tryon-Shoyinka in as well. I'm going quarterback. I'm going Shedeur Sanders. Quarterback 1-2 off the board in this draft. Something that I don't know I thought would ever happen, but it just happened. Looking at the New York Giants now, like quarterback, of course, but Aaron Rodgers, that decision is going to be huge and vital. Whether or not it's going to be Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson, I'm assuming that they're going to get one of the two. And they're going to still have to draft somebody. I'm not going to reach and go quarterback 3 at this point. Wide receiver set, running back pretty much set, day 3 pick, tight end, maybe a day 3 pick, overall pretty good. The guard position, I know that right now I hear the rumorly they're trying to go after somebody at guard right now, so I fully expect them to sign somebody on that offensive line. Tackle room looks fine, they can settle in there for now, but they could still use a developmental tackle. Corner's great, looks really good after free agency. Safety looks really good after free agency. Linebacker's fine. They could add somebody at some point. Interior, to me, is still an area they need to go after. Edge is just some more depth, but they did bring in Golston. Which this leads me to the first trade of this mock draft. It's the Las Vegas Raiders, and not for a quarterback, clearly. What is it going to cost? It's going to cost a little bit, I'll be honest. It's not going to be cheap, but at the same time, this roster is looking better and better. Giving up a 3rd rounder this season and a 2nd rounder next year to move up 3 spots, and I am selecting Travis Hunter, the versatile guy that's going to come in here and be exactly what this team needs as a playmaker on offense and much needed help in the secondary. Yeah, they brought in Eric Stokes, but am I stoked about it? You know what I'm saying? Like, let's go ahead, add a true difference maker in that back end, and also going to be a difference maker on the outside as a vertical threat in the offense. He makes plays down the field. They don't have a guy on their offense who can really be that Brock Bowers, of course, but they need somebody else. I love it with Travis Hunter. You're adding another weapon and a big-time weapon on defense, too. And then on to the New England Patriots. Clearly, quarterback-wise, they're in a good position here. Wide receiver, they got a lot of names. Ideally, you still add a true number 1 guy in here. That's what they lack. Running back, we can add on day 2, day 3. Tight end's fine. They're in a good position bringing Hooper back. Offensive line is still a big need, right? That left tackle spot is up for grabs. Morgan Moses solidifying that right tackle spot. What about the left tackle position? Arguably the biggest need on this roster right now. Cornerback looks great. Safety, they're still lacking a true free safety. Maybe that's something they look at day 2. Linebacker looks fine. I do think they could add somewhere in the draft. Defensive interior looks great. Edge room looks pretty solid with Landry now coming in, but it is still an area that, when they could go after an Abdul Carter here. However, that's not in the plans. We're trading back with the Carolina Panthers, who have been aggressive this offseason, especially on the defense side of the ball. What are they lacking? A true number one edge rusher. You bring in Pat Jones, going to help them out big time, but they could really use a guy like Abdul Carter, and that is what I'm going to be trading up for right here. I'm going to give up a second rounder this season, the 57 pick, plus a third rounder next year in order to come up for a game changer, an edge rusher in Abdul Carter, and is going to be that final, that Brian Burns replacement that they've been looking and longing for here at that number 4 overall pick. On to the Jacksonville Jaguars at number 5, and you look at this offense, quarterback set. Wide receiver, they're still lacking that short to intermediate guy in this offense. They've got some good deep threats here with Dyami Brown and Brian Thomas Jr. I still could see them adding to this wide receiving room. Running back, fine for now. Day 3 option if need be. Tight end looks good. I like Brent Strange, I will say. Offensive line, their starters are set. They could use some depth, but in general, their offensive line, their starters are there in place. Defensively wise, the cornerback room, I don't know if I love it per se, but at the same time, Jerry Jones, I imagine is going to play on the outside. Lewis in the slot, Campbell on the outside, and they could draft somebody else to develop behind those guys. Safety is the area that I would like to add somebody else in here, so we'll be looking at that at some point in this draft. Linebacker looks good. Interior defensive line, still an area that they need to address. Edge rushing room looks good. Remember, Eric Armstead's going to be moving to the interior next season, so that'll also help out that interior of the defensive line. They still could use some more depth in this edge room. That's probably a day 2 selection. The player I'm going with, I would say the 2 areas that I'm looking at here, either Mason Graham or Tetairoa McMillan. I'm actually going with McMillan from Arizona, and the reasoning for this, if there's one area that Trevor Lawrence needs to get better at as a passer, is over the short intermediate portions of the field, the middle of the field especially. Tetairoa McMillan, that's really where he thrives in the contested catch situations. He can make those tough catches, and you pair him along with your deep threats in Dyami Brown and Brian Thomas. I'm not really high on Gabe Davis. Maybe he ends up being a solid number 3 for them this season. At the same time, though, I would think that they need to add still to that wide receiving room. It's not like the top priority, I would guess, but at the same time, I do think it'd be nice you adding yourself like the Mike Evans for Liam Cohen in that offense. Defensive interior is another spot that they could look at. And speaking of the defensive interior, that's where I'm going for the Giants here at number 6. And I was probably going to look at just best available for the Giants at this point. I'm going Mason Graham on that defensive interior. Pair him up with Ward Robinson-Harris, Sexy Dexy, Elijah Chapman on that defensive line. I just think that makes the biggest amount of sense. That's the biggest hole remaining on the defensive side of the ball. Besides that, you're looking at offense, quarterback still in the draft / offensive guard. On to the New York Jets here at number 7, quarterback Justin Fields. I'm actually, as a Jets fan, I'm super excited to see what Justin Fields looks like in gangrene over here. And then at wide receiver, another big area of need. We need somebody else in here in this offense. That's a top priority. I would say if Tetairoa McMillan's on the board, that's an easy selection. Running back looks good. You got tight end, which still is an area of need as well. That could be a Tyler Warren scenario. Offensive line, right tackle is another area that we're going to have to look at. Defensively wise, we're in a pretty good spot on the defense side. I don't think we have any glaring holes. I don't think the defense will be the first round selection at this point. Cornerback looks good. Safety, we can get by here. I love the Cisco signing. Adams can play that second safety. We can draft somebody on day 2, day 3. Linebacker looks good. Defensive interior looks like we could use one more piece too. That'd be my only guess if like Mason Graham was here, then we could draft him as that guy next to Quentin Williams. Edge rusher is probably a day 2 need for some more depth purposes, which leads me into this pick. I'm going Armin Embu from Missouri to be our right tackle. You have bookend tackles, and that's just something I really would love to see. And it's something I've been clamoring for as a Jets fan for a hot minute now is let's go ahead, solidify that offensive line. AG's coming in here. He knows one or two good things about having an elite offensive line. Armin Embu at right tackle. Olu Fashanu at left tackle. I'm loving it all day, McDonald's style. On to the New Patriots after the trade down. I'm also going offensive line, as I mentioned earlier. I think that is the biggest area of avoid. Now, Tetairoa McMillan would be interesting if he was still on the board here, but I'm going Will Campbell, the tackle from LSU, plug in at that left tackle position. Morgan Moses at right tackle. That should provide good protection for Drake May. The New Orleans Saints, NOLA, let's go. And at quarterback, I think they're going to go into next season with Derek Carr, Spencer Rattler, and Jake Keener as the backups. Wide receiver, ideally you add one more guy, maybe a big bodied outside like X style of dude. Running back, could be an area on day 2, day 3 that they look at. Tight end should be good to go now with Juwan Johnson back under contract for 3 years or so. Offensive line, they need one more guard in here and maybe a tackle to compete with Trevor Penning. That would be my say on that. Cornerback is really thin right now. You got Kool-Aid. I like him a lot. I think he could step up into that top spot. No problem about it. Alante Taylor in the slot. They're going to need to add in the draft and on free agency more than likely. Safety, they're in a good spot here, bringing Tyrann Mathieu back on a 1-year extension or reworked deal, pardon me. Justin Reed brought in on a 3-year contract. Linebacker looks good. Interior defense line, they brought in Devon Gotchow, a trade from the Patriots. Good run defender, exactly what they need. Edge rusher with Chase Young back. They're in a good position here with Grenderson and Young. Jordan still there. So that's going to lead me into this pick where I'm actually going to go and take a cornerback here, which I didn't think that was going to be the area that they were going to go after. For me, it's either Jahdae Barron or it's going Will Johnson. Getting one of those cornerbacks in here would be really nice. And with Brandon Staley as the defensive coordinator, a guy that I think fits his scheme perfectly in that zone-heavy defense, Jahdae Barron from Texas. So I've not gone Jahdae Barron inside the top 10 at all in any mock draft. I'm doing it here, an ever versatile corner. I think he can hang on the outside. Alante Taylor can also play a little on the outside if they need him to, but you can keep him there in slot. Jahdae Barron on the outside with Kool-Aid as more your physical outside cornerback. And then on to the Chicago Bears at number 10, where it's starting to get really interesting with the Bears and what they've done. Quarterback, obviously good to go. Wide receiver, could they use a wide receiver 3? Absolutely. And it wouldn't shock me if they drafted a receiver at this 10th overall pick at this point, but I don't think it's going to be. It would just depend on who's available. Running back, it leads Ashton Jeanty as maybe the guy here for the Chicago Bears. It really wouldn't shock me. I love it. Love the fit. Tight end, they're going to need some depth. Cole Kmet, I don't know if it's a Tyler Warren scenario, but it is something that you never do know, right? Especially if Ben Johnson wants to play a lot of heavy personnel. It could be a sneaky need for this team that they're going to draft. So I wouldn't be shocked about that at any stretch. Offensive interior looks so much better. Drew Dahlman, Joe Tooney, Jonah Jackson, completely reworked interior. You got Darnell Wright, Braxton Jones, Karen Amagaji as your swingman. I still could see them adding a tackle here in the draft. It wouldn't shock me depending on who's available. Defense needs some depth at the cornerback room, but they're set. Safety could add some more help just with the Jaquan Brisker and the injury risk with the concussions. Linebacker for the future. This could be a day 2 pick, a little bit of a low-key need as well. They're getting a little more expensive at the linebacker position. Defensive tackle looks really good now, adding Grady Jarrett. Edge rushing room, you got Deo Dengbo to go along with Montez Sweat, Austin Booker. And I still think they could add somebody else here on day 2, but overall, they're in a pretty good spot here at edge. That leads me with the pick with the boulder, Ashton Jeanty. I'm going for it here, and Ben Johnson and his offense, he gets him that guy who's going to be a hybrid. He's not technically Jahmyr Gibbs, or he's not really David. Like, he's a little bit of a hybrid between the two, and he is just going to be an awesome addition to this running back room as that lead back bell cow. Going on to the San Francisco 49ers, where there's a lot more needs than you think here. They're going to need some depth at quarterback, but that's not an early need. Wide receiver could use a little bit more help behind him, but I think they've got their starters with Ricky Pearsall competing with Demarius Robinson, and you got Juwan Jennings and Brandon Ayuk as your 2 other locked-in starters there. Running back's fine. Tight end now with Luke Farrell as your backup to go with George Kittle. Offensive line. This is one of the biggest areas on offense, I would say, looking at post-free agency, is they need a developmental center. They could use another guard right now. I mean, I guess McKivitz could move inside the guard if they were to draft a right tackle, and then you could roll with that. But they're going to need at least one more offensive lineman here. Maybe Matt Hennessy competes there, but overall, like, that's a big area. Cornerback, they did bring in Trey Brown, who will compete, I'm sure, but this is still an area that they could look to address and add some more help. Safety, they should be in a good spot, adding Jason Pinnock in there. Linebacker, another area. Well, is D. Winters ready to go to step up next to Fred Warner as that number 2 linebacker? That's going to be something we have to keep an eye out on. I will be adding somebody at some point, I'm sure, in this draft with one of their later picks. Not as a first-round need or anything like that. This is where, you talk about offensive line and defensive line. Those are the top priorities. The defensive interior right now is razor thin. They need help here, and we're going to be looking at in the draft for sure. Edge rusher, they could use a number 2 guy. Yetur Gross-Matos, a little up and down this season, and they could use somebody else. Besides that Bears game, in my opinion, it was just kind of spotty, so getting a guy next to Nick Bosa would be really nice. So with some of the depth on the defensive line in this draft class, that's going to lead me to go offensive tackle first. I'm going Josh Simmons from Ohio State. Plug him in at right tackle, move McKivitz inside to guard, and that would at least give you a staple 5 offensive line that you can go into next season and figure it out. And we're still going to have to draft a developmental center on this offensive line, but I would say on day 2, we're going to have to really hit the defensive interior and off the edge. And then on to the Cowboys here, number 12, and looking at their roster, they could draft a quarterback somewhere on like day 3 to develop behind Dak. Wide receiver is still an area that I think they could go after. and add somebody else in here. I'm just not sure if they have that number 2 guy yet. Mingo, who knows? I do like Kevondre Turpin. I think they need to get the ball in his hands more often. Running back, a day 2 need. This is definitely, even though you got Javonte Williams, got to add somebody else in here. Tight end's fine. Offensive line, the interior looks good. I think between Beebe, Hoffman, Jones, and Smith, they're in a really good spot, and they got solid depth as well, and with Bass and whatnot. And then tackle, Asim Richards, I imagine, is their swing tackle. You go in with Guyton and Steele as your starters. I can still see them drafting somebody else to develop behind Terrence Steele for a season or so. Defensively wise, cornerback, my big question is here, how do they feel about Kalen Carson being the new slot corner, or are they going to rock with Marquise Bell in the slot a bit? Like, what are they going to do? Who's going to be their full-time star in the slot? That would be my big question there. And then at safety, Donovan Wilson, Malik Hooker still around, but they do need to invest and develop because they've already kind of hinted at cutting possibly one or maybe even both at some point. Linebacker, I'd love for this to add a veteran free agent, especially with DeMarvin Overshown playing. He's such a good player, but coming off an injury again, they need to add a little bit more veteran leadership next to Maurice Luafau and Damone Clark. Defensive material, another thing where I'd like them to add a nose guy. They bring in Osa Digizua back, so that's great. Hopefully Monty Smith gets stronger, can hold the point of attack a little bit better. Edge rushing room looks good. You add Peyton Turner, Marcus Nealand to go as that, with Sam Williams getting healthy, maybe you can find a quality number 2 and some good depth behind Micah Parsons. Which this leads me to an opening spot for the Dallas Cowboys to trade down a little bit, since I feel like they've got some voids, and also we're trying to maybe pick up some sort of picks here in this early day 3 range. So that's what I'm going to be focusing in on. And that's why the Denver Broncos, I think, would be a really, really nice candidate to move down. We're going to ask for so obviously pick 20 for 12. And what is it going to be? It's going to be a 3rd rounder and a 4th rounder. And that way the Cowboys have a little bit more range in here. They've got some areas to fill. Whereas the Denver Broncos, they've got a really good roster. I'm not saying you throw away all your draft capital or anything like that. But at the same time, like, I want to move up for a difference maker. I'm trying to move in front of the Colts, in other words, for Tyler Warren, Penn State tight end. He will be that final piece that they need on that offense, I feel like, and just be that dominant Jimmy Graham presence. I mean, different players, but he's going to be an absolute monster there for them in that, and for Bo Nix and this offense. To the Miami Dolphins here, with their offense looking pretty good. They still need a guard. Quarterback's fine. Wide receiver's fine. They got Nick Westbrook-Akini. I like that sign. Tight end, you could look at on day 2, day 3 if you wanted to. That would be the one area I'd say receiver-wise they could look at. Offensive line, still a big priority to add. You got Brewer. You got Daniels coming in here. Who's going to be that other guard? Tackle-wise, I imagine it's going to be between Patrick Paul, Austin Jackson, Terron Armstead. We'll see if he plays or not. Larry Borum's coming in to be a swingman, I would imagine. So guard is still an area they have to look at on this offensive line. Defense, cornerback, huge area that they're going to have to address here, right? This is something we're going to be looking at early in the draft. Who's going to be the opposite guy with Jalen Ramsey? And obviously Ramsey's getting a little bit older now too. Safety is another huge area that they need to address in this one. Linebacker's fine. Interior defensive line, another area that they've got to look at. It's desperate at this point. Edge rusher's fine. Leads me to this pick. I just got to go defensive line. There's just so many areas that they could look at, like cornerback, as we talk about safety, offensive guard. Like, there's a lot of spots this team could really be looking at in the draft. I'm going to go try to fill one of those here with Derek Harmon from Oregon, the pass rusher, who's also really strong at the point of attack. He's going to help out their run game, put him next to Zach Seiler on that defensive line. They got to find some core pieces on that front. Looking at the Indianapolis Colts, quarterback, at least you got competition with Daniel Jones. That's fine. And they actually spent some money, too, in free agency. Wide receiver looks good. Running back, could use some depth on day 2, day 3. Tight end, area of need, right? This is a big area that they're going to have to look at in the draft. And then offensive line could be something that they look at, once again, filling for Will Fries. Now, Matt Gonzalez does have versatility, could end up sliding to one of those guard positions, so that makes it a little bit less of a need possibly for them. So that's why between Nelson and Gonzalez, they can figure that out. Bortolini is the new starting center. He looked good in general. Bernard Raymond, Brandon Smith is also back, so they're in a good spot there at tackle. Cornerback, they are in a good position now with Javarius Ward, Kenny Moore, and then they can figure it out between Juju Brents, Jalen Jones, and Samuel Warmack. Safety's looking good now with Cam Bynum and Nick Cross. Linebacker, going to need a number 2 linebacker in here, maybe day 2, day 3, add some more competition in there. Don't know if it's a first-round need, though. Jair Franklin's a beast. Interior defense line, some depth on day 2, day 3, possibly. Edge rushing room looks pretty good, even with the loss of Deo Odengbo. Pick is in for me. I got to add a tight end presence in here, especially as much as Shane Steichen loves those tight ends and the way he uses 2 tight end sets. We're going Colston Loveland, going to be a big impact at not just on the line, but as a receiving option as well. Got to get stronger as a blocker, but he does have all the potential to be with his size profile. And then moving on to the Atlanta Falcons, and I think the big areas that they still have to fill are still there. Quarterback's fine with Kirk Cousins as your backup, I guess, or maybe he gets a chance again, depending on the Michael Penix and how he looks in the offseason and whatnot, but I imagine he's going to be their starter going forward. Receiver, this is something they could draft on day 2, day 3. They don't have a ton of draft capital. Maybe you can try to trade down if you can here. This is another spot to do that. Running back's good to go. Tight end's fine for now. Ryan Newsel did play well in absence of Drew Dalman, so I think they feel confident in Newsel, but at the same time, I still think they could add a center here at some point in this draft. Other than that, though, the offensive line looks pretty good, just gives you some depth besides that. Cornerback, another area that needs some depth. I mean, you can go into next season with Mike Hughes and Clark Phillips to go, obviously, with A.J. Terrell, but that's an area that they could be looking at too in the draft. Safety is a big area as of right now. Who's going to be that other guy besides Jesse Bates? So this could be a first-round pick easily at this moment. Linebacker looks better with Divine Diablo. So I think between Caden Ellis, between Troy Anderson as a backup there, they can figure this out, right? I mean, it's not the worst-case scenario. Defensive interior should be able to be okay. They got a lot of depth in terms of the youth. They got a lot of guys with some promise there, like Ruka Rororo, Brandon Dorless maybe playing more snaps next year. So David Onyemata as the veteran, still an area that they could add to with losing Grady Jarrett. Edge rusher, though, it's still a priority. It's still a top need when you look at this. They brought in Leonard Floyd. You got Arnold Ebiketie, who's going to be somebody else in there, can be their long-term number 1 guy. The edge rushers currently on the board. We're going to go ahead and go grab James Pierce Jr. I know there's the off-the-field stuff always.
Are you going to pay for that?
Talk to the hand.
Hey, it's like, I don't know, what to think with all that stuff. We're just going to get a good pass rusher for this football team. On to the Arizona Cardinals. I would say the top needs, quarterback good to go. Wide receiver, they could add some speed in here. Running back's fine. Tight end's good. Offensive line, you return your starters. Could just use some depth in certain positionings and whatnot, like guard, maybe a developmental tackle. Defensively wise, cornerback, do they have a true number 1 corner? No, but they've got some promising young players that can develop into that regard, like Garrett Williams is turning into one of the best slot corners in the NFL. Safety, you got your returning starters there. Linebacker could be an area that they low-key could go after early in the draft. Akeem Davis-Gaither brought in one on like a couple-year deal, not super expensive. And I imagine he can step up in there for Kaiser White. However, that could be an area that they look at. Interior defensive line, though, is going to be a big area that we look at. You got Justin Jones, Bilal Nichols returning. You got Dante Stills. Like, some of these guys, you figure maybe, you're going to get much better play on that interior with the return of these guys. At the same time, though, it wouldn't shock me if they go and address that defensive line, that defensive interior specifically. Edge now looks a lot better, though. I don't know if this is a first-round need, bringing Josh Sweat, Baron Browner, Xavier Collins coming back. They're in a pretty good BJ Ojulari. I actually don't know if this is an early need at this point. So I'm going to go grab a big monster on that front with Kenneth Grant, the Michigan Wolverine. Exactly what they need. And remember, Justin Jones, Bilal Nichols, at this point, really only 1 year left on their contracts guaranteed after this next season. They need to add more depth in there in general. On to the Cincinnati Bengals. Quarterback, obviously not a need. Wide receiver, they could add somebody else at some point in this draft. Not an early scenario unless it's just too good to pass up. Running back should be fine. They've got a lot of guys who can play. They're good to go there. Tight end, they're in a good positioning. Offensive line is a big area, right? Guard is a huge area of need for this team. Defensively wise, cornerback could still be an area that this team looks at, right? You got some guys that can compete for jobs. Cam Taylor-Britt maybe bounces back next season. However, I think cornerback is definitely an area that this team needs to look at in the draft. Safety, you can figure it out. Hopefully Geno Stone bounces back. Jordan Battle is your other safety. It's not terrible. It really isn't. Linebacker, you brought in Oren Burks. I actually like that. I thought it was an upgrade, if anything else, over Akeem Davis-Gaither. And, of course, you still got Logan Wilson coming back, too. Defensive tackle, I love that they brought B.J. Hill in here as, once again, bringing him back and returning with T.J. Sladen now next to him. Chris Jenkins and McKinley Jackson is your young guys. Edge rusher is a clear area of need, of course. So that makes the choice pretty easy for me. I'm going to go grab a pass rusher. Shamar Stewart, his upside is through the roof. The athleticism, the intangibles, I'm going with him here. It's the whole traits first production sort of thing. However, he does have the quickest time to first pressure in all of FBS with like 2.45 seconds or whatever that number of 4.43 seconds. You name it, beep, beep, beep. Sounds like the robotics out here, but we're going to go get some more pass rush on that defense line for the Bengals. And then on to the Seattle Seahawks, where they've got so much draft capital. It's almost fun. It's really crazy, but Quarterback, you got Sam Darnold now in here. They're going to need another weapon in here, and that's with wide receiving room, so that's certainly an area we'll be looking at. Running back's good. Tight end's fine. They could add a little more competition, but it's okay. Offensive line is a big need. That interior specifically is huge. Now, Josh Jones is a swingman to Abe Lucas. I feel good about that, so I'm going to prioritize this interior for sure and upgrading that area. Center or cornerback-wise, this is an area that they could add some more help here in the draft, but with Witherspoon and Willen still under contract, you can figure it out between Josh Jobe and Nehemiah Pritchett in terms of starters-wise. They don't have to draft somebody here in the first round. Safety, they're in a good spot with Love and Bryant. And then linebacker-wise, you brought Ernest Jones back, Tyrese Knight, and this is an area that they could look at on day 3 as some more depth to compete for that third spot. Interior defensive line looks great. You brought Jaron Reed back. Edge rusher, this is something that they could look at on day 2, early day 3, as some more depth behind Derek Hall, Boye Mafe, and Uchenna Nwosu. Look, I'm sticking to my guns when it comes to the Seattle Seahawks. You got to improve the offensive line. Receiver is something I really think we'll be able to address here on day 2 and add a big-time playmaker on the outside to go along with Jackson Smith and Jigba. But the number one priority that I feel like they've got to fit is that offensive line. We'll go Kelvin Banks, who can play guard early on, and also could give him that right tackle of the future. Abe Lucas going to last year of his contract. If he can't stay healthy, then that could be something that they look at. On to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They brought a lot of their starters back, really. Like, obviously, quarterback, they're in a good position. Wide receiver, they're in a good position as well. I think with McMillan, Godwin, and Evans, one of the best wide receiving groups in the NFL. Running back, one of the best running back rooms in the NFL. Tight end, they're fine. Offensive line, they return their starters. They should get better, as more experience between these guys. Defensively wise, cornerback, they're going to have to add somebody in here for sure. With the injuries that they've had, this could be a sneaky first round need. You never do know. Safety wise, could be an area that they look at as well. I wouldn't shock me. Christian Izien is ever versatile, but it is an area that they could look to add into this positioning to compete and be that long-term guy next to Antoine Winfield. So it wouldn't shock me them going safety early in this draft. Linebacker is another area that we have to look at with Levante David. Getting older now, let's maybe find somebody else in that room. Defensive interior, they bring back, there were some of the returning starters with Greg Gaines, obviously Vita Vea and Kalijah Kancey. Edge rusher, the big addition with Hassan Reddick, so they're in a pretty good spot. Nelson's back too. Braswell, Diaby, those 4 guys is your main rotation. This is where I'm going to add that beast of a playmaker in Nick E. Manwari from South Carolina with his size and athletic profile to be that number 2 safety with Antoine Winfield. And as I was mentioning with Izien, he's ever versatile, can play in the slot, be that backup cornerback for them, and backup safety. I love adding E-Man Wari to elevate that room with Antoine Winfield as your 1-2 punch in that secondary. And then moving on to the Dallas Cowboys here, number 20 after the trade back. I'm just going to go BPA here, and for me, that's Will Johnson on the board from Michigan. People are talking about him dropping a ton. Like, I still think he's a top 10 player in this draft class, and I wasn't even the highest on Will Johnson going into the season and whatnot. Like, I was higher on Benjamin Morrison. However, I think Will Johnson at this point makes too much sense for the Cowboys. He comes in here, and you can move Deron Bland back into the slot. You have no problem with that. You could rock out with Diggs and Johnson, and Diggs has been injured throughout his career, so it just makes more sense to add more cornerback room. Now losing Jordan Lewis, why not go and improve that secondary, get somebody else on a cheap contract as well? So that really makes too much sense for the Dallas Cowboys. And then the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm not going to panic with the quarterback situation right now because I do think they're going to get answered between Aaron Rodgers today, which I would imagine that's the favorite as he lands with Pittsburgh. We'll see if he goes to the Giants, though. So we'll keep an eye on all those things. This could be a quarterback possibly, but I do think they'll get somebody in free agency. DK Metcalf, George Pickens. Wow, that's going to be a fun tandem to have out there. So wide receiver-wise, not a huge need going into the draft now at this point. They did have to give a second-round pick. Running back is something we could look at here. This is an area, they brought in Kenny Gainwell. You got Jalen Warren, who I do think can step up into a lead back role. However, wouldn't shock me if they go after a running back early. Tight end's good to go. Offensive line looking pretty solid as well, returning some of their starters. Now, they're going to rely on some of these young guys. I would like for them to bring in maybe a veteran just in case, right? But, there's some promise here. There's also a little bit of shakiness that you could be looking at. Defensively wise, Darius Slay coming in opposite of Joey Porter and Benny Bishop in the slot. You got Corey Trice as your swingman. Certainly not bad there. Don't mind that. Safety room looks good too. The Joker and Minka. Linebacker looks great. Interior defensive line could use somebody else here, and that's kind of what I'm leaning at the moment. The edge room looks great. So that's why my pick here is going to be Walter Nolan, the pass rusher from Ole Miss, to go and add some more interior presence with Keanu Benton and Cameron Hayward, losing Larry Ogunjobi. On to the Bolts here at number 22, and you look at quarterback. Going to have to add somebody probably in the draft and free agency, but it's not an early need or anything like that. Receiver is something they're going to have to look at. Lat McConkey, Quentin Johnson, Who's going to be that other guy in this room? They need another playmaker, and that goes hand in hand with the tight end position as well. So adding another playmaker has got to be a priority in this draft. Running back room with Najee Harris coming in shouldn't be a huge void that they have to fill early in the draft. It'll be something maybe late day 2, day 3. Offensive line, they need a guard/center here. Now, I've heard Zion's going to move back into the inside or at center position. Boozman could end up playing guard too for them in the long haul. That's an option. He's reliable. I don't mind that. They could keep it the way it is. No matter what, though, I expect them to add a guard or a center at some point in the draft. Tackle looks good. Cornerback, you've got guys here, and they've got some young guys as well. So Still, Hart, both played well in their rookie seasons. You bring in Dante Jackson as a veteran leader in there. Safety looks great. You got linebackers going to be very thin. I think they'll bring in a veteran in free agency still to go along with their young guys in Henley and Colshan. This is where I would say their biggest need on the defense in the draft is interior of the defensive line. You lost Poona Ford. That's a big void that they're going to have to fill for sure. Edge rushing wise, they could use some more help here as well. I mean, Mac, Dupree, and Tui Pelotu, not bad, but it is something they could look at like on day 2 to get a little younger. And, with Bud Dupree, 32 years old, and Khalil Mack, 34 years old, it would make sense to youthify this room a little bit. Go get another playmaker, and the best available playmaker between Luther Burden, Matthew Golden, Emeka Ibuka, all 3 of these guys on the board. And I think it makes a lot of sense to pick 22, the value where they're at right now. And that's the selection for the Chargers, is getting some more playmaking, some more pass catchers in this offense for Justin Herbert. And then on to the Green Bay Packers here, and I think the big thing here, offensively wise, it's still a question of, can they add another wide receiver in here? Absolutely. They've got some injuries to deal with Christian Watson, so that's something to keep an eye on. Who's going to be that big vertical threat out there? So that's to be something we could look at. Running back's good, tight end's good. Offensive line should be fine. Like, they can figure it out between Banks. Jenkins could end up playing center possibly, and then Morgan going into year number 2. You got Jacob Monk to develop. Tackle-wise, they're good to go with their starters. Could use a backup, though. That's something like on late day 2, early day 3 to look at. And then cornerback-wise, they got a lot of interesting slot corners in here. I imagine Nate Hobbs going to move to the outside, though, this next season for them. Keyshawn Nixon in the slot. Bullard, I don't know what his role is going to be. And then Carrington Valentine can go on the outside there with Jair Alexander, who is still a Packer. And that could be something they look at drafting as well. We'll see. But for right now, I'm going to assume Jair gets that reworked deal at some point. Safety's in a good spot. Linebacker's fine. Just bring in maybe another veteran if you want to, but that's not a huge need. Interior defense line, I could see them adding somebody in the interior there to youthify, add some more help on that. And then edge rushing, though, this is my big area of need on the defense side of the ball, is adding another pass rusher they need to. That's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to go get Mikael Williams from Georgia. He loves those traits. Gutekunst I'm talking about loves pass rushers with some traits, and that's Mikael Williams. Let him develop for a season or 2 because that's the way they roll, and he can be their long-term pass rusher. One of my favorite chants, Skull, Skull, Skull. We're on the block here now, and quarterback-wise, I'm very interested. I imagine they're going to add some sort of backup in here at some point there to go along with J.J. McCarthy. I'm figuring, though, McCarthy's going to be their starter going into next season. Wide receiver's fine. They could add somebody else later in the draft, but at least you got 2 studs out there. Running back, another area they could add some depth in this draft, possibly on day 2, day 3. Unfortunately, they don't have a second-round pick right now, but maybe they can trade back to. Tight end just need to add some depth, and it's a lot of things with this area. But I'd still say on the offense side of the ball, the offensive line is still an area that they have to improve. Maybe they trade Garrett Bradbury after bringing in Ryan Kelly, which makes sense. Will Fries at right guard. Who's going to be the left guard? Do you feel confident Ed Ingram, Blake Brendel, you can go into next season with those 2 guys as one of your starters? That's one area you kind of have to think about in this draft. And I still could see them going after that in the first round. Tackle's fine. Could add a backup for some depth, whatever. Cornerback, Byron Murphy, Isaiah Rodgers. Both going to be guys a little bit on the smaller side. Could they add somebody with some size on the outside? It would not shock me if they look at adding a cornerback with some size. And in terms of who can play in the slot, well, Josh Martellus plays a little bit in the slot too as a hybrid player. Plays a lot in the box. He's a really good run defender. You got Harrison Hitman Smith. And then you got Theo Jackson, who they gave a contract extension. They are very high on him, and I think they feel like he's going to be one of the heir apparents at this safety position. Maybe he ends up taking over for Cam Bynum, and they're ready to go with that. Still an area that they could go after in the draft, even with Harrison Smith now getting a little bit older, possibly as a Malachi Starks is still on the board too at this point. Linebacker's fine, and then you go interior defense line. Looks way better now with Jonathan Allen on a big contract, and then you got also Harrison Smith, and then they weren't done, Javon Hargrave. Edge rush looks good. Their defensive line looks super scary. I'm actually going to go finish this offensive line. We're going to go add in Gray Zabel from North Dakota State as that left guard. You plug him right in, and you have a completely rebuilt offensive line between Zabel, Kelly, and Fries. On to the Houston Texans now at 25. And you look at the roster. Quarterback, they're good to go. Wide receiver, at least you brought in Christian Kirk, who can fill in early on for Tank Dell and give him a season. So that's fine. Like, I think between Nico Collins, Christian Kirk, Justin Watson as a deep threat, you got Mechie, Hutchinson. It's not maybe a first-round need at this point. It's still an area they could go after, but maybe just not a first round unless it's a BPA situation. Running back, another area they could draft later on late day 2 or early day 3. Tight end, it's not overly inspiring, but they could get the job done there. I don't think they need to spend a first-round pick on that. Offensive line is the top need on the offense, in my opinion. The left tackle, is it going to be Titus Howard? Blake Fisher, you moving him back over to left tackle because he does have experience at left tackle. So that could be a possibility, but do I feel overconfident in that? No, I really don't. So that's why I think offensive line is a huge need for them. The interior is the same thing. They should be okay here, but it's not inspiring a whole ton of confidence. Cornerback-wise, they're in a really good spot here. Secondary in general looks good with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson coming in on over trade with Kalen Bullock and Jamie Ward and MJ Stewart's back as well, core special teamer. Linebackers fine. Getting healthy with Christian Harris will just be huge in its own right. Interior defense line, I would say, is kind of the bigger area on the defense side of the ball that I'd be looking at. Adding some more youth onto the room. They brought in Sheldon Rankins, but it is something they could add a little bit more talent on the front for there. And edge rushing room looks great. So the pick is going to be Josh Connolly Jr. from Oregon. Going to plug into that left tackle's position. Titus Howard can either compete at right tackle or you can have Blake Fisher win there and Titus can keep on the interior however they want to work it. But Connolly's going to be that pass protector to protect CJ Stroud. And then we look at the Los Angeles Rams here, number 26, and their roster. Quarterback's fine. With Matthew Stafford back, I don't think they need to go at this early in the draft. Maybe throw a late pick on it, whatever. Wide receiver looks great now with Devontae Adams, Puka Nacua, Jordan Whittington, Tutu Atwell. Yeah, really good. Running back's fine. Tight end, it's okay. It's an area they need to upgrade. A day 2 pick would be really nice to throw at that. Offensive line, they return their starters, and then you have a competition between Bo Limmer and Coleman Shelton, and whoever's the backup. Like both of those guys can play center or guard, so I think that's good. Tackle of the future, though, is still an area that this team needs to look at for that right tackle position. So drafting somebody, day 2, day 3. Defensively wise, they need a cornerback still. They need a guy with some size on the perimeter who can be that outside guy. I like Kobe Durant. Dorius Williams getting a little bit older now, so I think this could be a first-round need for them. Safety, they've got a lot of guys in here. Do they have a true ball-hawking free safety? No, but they can get by with what they have right now. Linebacker's a huge need. Who's going to be that guy next to Omar Speights? Maybe they bring somebody in free agency, but at the moment, it's really thin, and it is definitely a huge area of need, just like cornerback could be a big area of need for them. Interior defensive line looks great. Kobe Turner, Braden Fisk, and Poona Ford, exactly what they needed on that defensive line. Edge-wise, they need some depth. They need a number 2 guy, number 3 guy. Can Nick Hampton, Brandon Jackson step up into that role? Yeah, I think so. But however, also Keir Thomas. But yeah, they're going to have to add to that. I'm going to go add a stud linebacker in here, Jihaad Campbell. This is a guy that they have not had a chance to really draft a guy like this, in my opinion. Somebody with ability to also rush the passer, as well as drop back into coverage, be a true difference maker, and maybe be their Fred Warner, a guy that absolutely can change the game at that linebacker position. And they've seen what that can do up close and personal with, guys like Zach Bond, what that position can actually mean. So we go get a difference maker with Jihaad Campbell, the potential of a difference maker. On to the Baltimore Ravens at 27, and quarterback good to go. Wide receiver with DeAndre Hopkins coming in. They should be in a good spot. Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, not too big of a need in my opinion. Running back's good to go with King Henry and Justice Hill. Tight end, get a developmental guy at some point in this draft, but they're fine there. Patrick Card's back. That's great. One of the best lead blocking players in the NFL. Offensive line, they've got a guard spot opening up. Maybe Voorhees can fill into that left guard position. Remember, he got a good chance to be the starter early on, and then Makari ended up taking over there. So that could be something where Voorhees just steps right in. You're good to go. However, it will be an area that I add some competition into. Cornerback, this is another area that's a little thin, right? They're going to need somebody else. But I think Ardarius Washington can slide back into the slot next season if they want him to do that. And Humphrey gives you versatility. Wiggins will be a full-time starter. Safety will be an area we look at. Maybe TJ Tampa, too, can end up starting into one of those the outside cornerback position to go along with Nate Wiggins. That could be an option for them, depending on how high they are on him. Linebackers, fine. Could use some depth later in the draft. defense tackle. Still need another pass rusher on that front. Edge rushing room. At least they got some depth. They're in a good position. I think it's straightforward. We're just going to get Malachi Starks from Georgia. He's going to be a versatile player too. Like, he can line up in the slot. He can play deep. And it allows Kyle Hamilton also to play in that slot hybrid role that he does. And Malachi Starks can be the true deep safety to go along with Ardarius Washington. So in general, that'd be your secondary. And really bolster that up as much as you can. Moving on to the Detroit Lions here. And you look at their roster. And quarterback, good to go. Is fine for right now. Wide receiver, they could use a big-bodied X-style receiver. And especially Tim Patrick, I'm hearing the Jets are very interested in him. So if they're unable to retain him, it could be something they look at in this draft. Maybe not a first-round need, but it's something maybe on day 2, day 3. Running back's fine. Look great. Tight end looks great. And then offensive line, you return most of your starters here. Now, unfortunately, we still don't know yet with Kevin Zeitler. Hopefully, they are able to bring him back because that would be great. Then Mahogany can compete with Glasgow as your other starting guard. Maybe Giovanni Manu can compete there too. Who knows? But tackle room looks good. Cornerback room looks fine, like with Arnold, Reed, and then you have some competition between Armeek Robinson, Enos Rakestraw. It's going to be some ups and downs early on, I imagine. Brian Branch and Kirby Joseph are your safeties. They could add some more safety depth. Then linebacker-wise, good to go. Derek Barnes returns. That'll be huge. He plays a hybrid role just like Trevor Nowatzki does. Alex Anzalone, a little bit of tongue twister right there. Jack Campbell, starting linebackers. Malcolm Rodriguez as the backup there. Maybe they draft somebody late. And then interior defense line, they brought in Roy Lopez, add some more depth, especially with Lee McNeil early on, maybe being out for a little bit. They could still maybe add somebody there too, but I think for the most part, they're okay. They can get by there for the time being until Aleem is back. Edge is really the big area that I'm focusing on this defense side of the ball. Let's get another pass rusher. Yeah, you brought Marcus Davenport back on a 1-year deal. I'm not like overly enthused about that, and I want to make sure we add somebody else in here. And with Mike Green on the board right now, that's an easy selection for me. Let's go bolster up this pass rush some more. Then on to the Commandos, the Washington Commanders. Quarterback, good to go with Jaden Daniels. Wide receiver, I think they're fine here with Deebo Samuel now coming in. Scary Terry, Luke McCaffrey can work in as that wide receiver 3. I do think they'll add to this position, and it could be early, who knows, but we'll see. For right now, I think it's more of a day 2, early day 3 priority. Running back, going to be something, same thing, like day 2, late day 2, early day 3 priority. Tight end's good to go. Offensive line is something this team still could look at, especially with Samuel Cosmi. Like, if Sam Cosmi wasn't injured, they'd probably be in a much better position here, but you figure Biadash, already figuring to be your stars. Maybe Coleman moves inside to guard, possibly, especially early on, and then you could rock with Wiley and Tunsil as your 2 starters. I think guard, hybrid, like right tackle of the future, depending on how they view Brandon Coleman as to whether it's a tackle or as a guard, that's going to be what they need to look at in the draft. Cornerback, they're very thin. You need to add another cornerback here, whether it's the slot or on the outside. If you want to keep Mikey on the outside, then you're going to need to look at a slot, and that may be more of a later round need because slot corners are still a little bit easier to find out there. And then safety should be okay. It's not a ton of confidence here, and it could be an area they look at. But Quan Martin, figure one of your starting positions. Will Harris going to compete with Percy Butler out there at the cornerback or the safety position. Linebacker, need to draft for the future here. Okay, this is a mid-round need, something they can develop behind Bobby Wagner and Frankie Louvu. Interior is fine. It's okay. Hopefully, Drazan takes that next step. Javon Kinlaw brought in on 3-year deal. Deron Payne still under contract, so just find a little bit of depth on maybe day 3. And then edge rush is the top need on this defense. Have to improve this. That's exactly what we're doing. Donovan Ezeraku from Boston College. Love the name. I love his film. He is so disruptive. He's one of the twitchiest patch rushers in the league, or in the NFBS. I'm tongue twisted tied out here, but we're going Donovan Ezeraku, the pass rusher from Boston College. On to the Buffalo Bills, and they've had some fun players in here, but you start quarterback, not a need. Wide receiver, looks good. I think Joshua Palmer is an underrated signing. Running back, good to go, especially Ty Johnson back as a good third down receiving option. And then you look at tight ends, fine. You look at offensive line, return their starters. Could add some depth, some future play, since you got to figure Connor McGovern, David Edwards, both going into a contract year. So that could be something they look at. Defensively, cornerback sticks out to me as the biggest need maybe on this roster. So that's going to be something we look at. Who's going to be that outside cornerback to go along with Christian Benford? Safety, another area that this team could still look at as well. Like Cole Bishop going to year number 2 should help. You brought DeMar Hamlin back. I would like to add more competition in with guys like Tyler Rapp and Cam Lewis, etc. Linebacker, return your starters. You're in a good spot there. You get healthy Matt Milano. That'll be awesome. Terrell Bernard on an extension. You needed to do that. Interior defensive line, Larry Ogunjobi coming in here, giving a little bit of a raise as well, $8 million guaranteed. I like it, helping that interior out a little bit more. Edge-wise, you bring in Joey Bosa and Michael Hoyt, filling some major areas off the edge for them. They look really good off the edge now. I'm going to go add a speedster, the top man at the combine, Maxwell Harrison from Kentucky. Fits the scheme like a glove. He comes from a very heavy, I mean, that's really where I think he's at his best, is in a heavy zone system. Buffalo does that. Maybe they transition to play a little bit more man coverage at some point. And Harrison can do that. I just think on the line of scrimmage in terms of physicality is not really his match. However, you put him next to Christian Benford, he doesn't have to deal with all the physical guys out there. So Harrison, add in some secondary help. The Super Bowl runner-up Kansas City Chiefs, and you start off quarterback, good to go. Wide receiver-wise, you return your starters with Rice, Worthy, and Brown. Maybe something they look at adding a little bit later. Maybe not first-round need, though. Running back could be a little bit of a sneaky first-round need. Who's going to be that guy next to Isaiah Pacheco? They bring in Elijah Mitchell, who should help out, add some more depth in that room. But ultimately, that's going to be something they have to look at from losing Shamaje Perine as well. And then tight end, fine. They're good to go with Noah Gray and Travis Kelce back. Offensive line, it's a really, dude, I have no idea exactly where they're going to target some areas, but they do need to still address this offensive line. You got Creed Humphrey returning, Trey Smith returning. That's huge. Those two guys on the interior, stable pieces. Then you have the other competing spot between Mike Galliendo as the veteran in the room to go along with Kingsley Suamatea and maybe Hunter Norzad. Who ends up winning that job? Good question. And then you figured your starting tackles will be Jalen Moore and Jawan Taylor. Still need to add more tackle, though, I feel like. You know what I mean? But I don't know what to do there. And it's such a difficult one, how they want to address that. Cornerback, they're in a good spot, adding Christian Fulton in there, and that allows Trent McDuffie to play a little inside out a little bit more even next season. Safety, you got Jaden Hicks going to year two. He played great in his rookie season. I have no question that he can be a starter. Add some more depth, sure, but you got Deion Bush who can fill in Christian Roland Wallace as well. And then you got linebacker, great. They return their starters. Nick Bolton's back. Interior, so thin. It's a huge area that they're going to have to look at, getting a guy next to Chris Jones. Edge rusher is also a need. I think they need to add some more talent into that room. They lost Tershawn Wharton. Well, I'm going to go add in Darius Alexander, a guy that's going to be able to get after the quarterback and give you some severe juice up on that front to go along with Chris Jones, create matchup problems. Alexander is going to do that. On to the Philadelphia Eagles here and Super Bowl champions. Quarterback, good to go. Wide receiver, should be fine. Like, they can figure it out between Jahan Dotson, who did step up late in the season in the Super Bowl as that third wide receiver. Running backs, good to go. Saquon Barkley, big extension. Tight end, could draft somebody here to develop behind Dallas Goedert, Grant Calcaterra. And then offensive line, they brought in Kenyon Green, which is very curious to me. Sparks the curiosity in many ways, many shapes and forms. Do they say, hey, Jeff Stoutland, this is a reclamation project. We know he's got talent. Can you get him in your university and coach him up, give him a major degree or whatever, whatever the kids get nowadays. But yeah, I did graduate. I should know this stuff. But you go on to the defense. Cornerback, okay. Do they feel confident that number two cornerback is going to be on the outside, is going to be Ringo or Ricks? That's another interesting thing. You got two quality starters with Mitchell and DeJean. But yeah, who's going to be that other cornerback in this room? Are they going to bring somebody in? I'm guessing that they'll still bring in a veteran out there. There's plenty of guys they can bring in. Safety, another thing. Losing Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, they're going to have to find that number two guy. Do they feel confident Sidney Brown or Tristan McCollum or Lewis Seen can be that number two safety? And that's very in question right now. Malachi Starks and also Nick Emanwari could very much be in play. Now, both are off the board at this point. I'm not going to go, I like Xavier Watts. I think he'd be a really nice addition as well. So who knows? That could be an option too. Linebacker, good to go, returning their starters. Interior defense line, still an area that this team could, Howie Roseman loves some trenches. And they have not filled that void of losing Milton Williams. More Ojimo, I do think, could fill that. But I do know they like their rotation. So adding in some much-needed snaps lost from like 600 snaps from Milton Williams that they lost there. Edge, always a need for the Philadelphia Eagles, but they're in a pretty good spot with Huff, Hunt, and Smith. I'm going to do something for the Eagles that I've not done at all in any mock draft, I don't think, gone in the first round. I'm going cornerback, and I'm going one of my guys in this class, Benjamin Morrison. He does it again. Howie Roseman, I think, might be just finding these guys who keep falling for stupid reasons. I mean, you can say injury's not as stupid. It happens. It is what it is. Hip injury is serious. And he also has a shoulder injury too. But man, if he is out there, he is one of the best cornerbacks in this draft. And that ends up the first round. You pair him with so you got Benjamin Morrison, Quinion Mitchell, and Cooper DeJean. I'm pissed off. Like, that's unbelievable. Oh, yeah. Mover on to round number 2, and you see we got Shedeur Sanders. I know there's going to be some controversy with that one, I'm sure, but you move into the second round, as we were mentioning earlier, back into your defensive line. And with Joe Antonio coming back, like, it's not as big of a need right now, and Zach Santer can be the swing man going into next season. It's still something they could look at later, but I think at this point we're looking at running back, interior defensive line. And hey, don't rule out a BPA position like a wide receiver either, which is exactly what I'm going to do. And you go get another weapon here with Jerry Jeudy and Cedric Tillman. I think that Luther Burden would be a great addition to go in there into that offense. So yeah, I'm not going to pass up on that type of opportunity. On to the New York Football Giants. I think we got to address the offensive line here. So that is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go grab Tyler Booker, plug him into that guard position, and you're booming. You got to improve that area. Evan Neal, sure, he can compete there. Am I overly confident? No, I think that Booker would be a fantastic addition. Or Donovan Jackson would also be a good one too, because Jackson could end up playing long-term tackle. So however you want to look at it, maybe Donovan Jackson would make a little bit more sense. Maybe I clicked the button a little too soon there. I was getting a little trigger happy, but I think Booker would be a really good selection. They got to address that interior offensive line. And then for the Tennessee Titans, this is such a tough one because I think you could look at an Emeka Egbuka here, and that would be a really good pick. But they got to get an edge rusher. They just do. I'm going to go ahead and take that chance on Jalen Walker here in the second round. I just think the value is too good at this point on the board. So let's go ahead and try to prove that edge position. You lose Harold Landry. Now you bring in Jalen Walker to go with Arden Key. And then going on to the Jacksonville Jaguars here with their next pick, we got Tetairoa McMillan, which is, it's something I don't know exactly if they're going to do that. I could probably see Mason Graham as maybe more of a realistic option. Hey, we'll go and get an interior defense lineman here. There's Tyleik Williams still on the board. I'm going to go do that. I love that combination. You could go Mason Graham, and then you get a wide receiver in the second round. That's a really good. Emeka Egbuka was there. Like, both of those options, like hindsight 2020, would be excellent. And Mason, if you went Mason Graham and then Emeka Egbuka, or if in this case scenario we went Tyleik Williams and Tetairoa McMillan, I think both are really good options for the Jaguars team. On to the Raiders here at 37, and we did a little shocker move. We got Travis Hunter. We did have to trade a third rounder and a second rounder next season, but I think what he brings as a deep threat as a wide receiver, a weapon for Geno Smith, and as a true number one corner, I love it, man. I really do. Hey, we could go add another weapon in here too, but I'm going to go add a running back, right? Especially when this offense and the way things run from Pete Carroll. Go get that bell cow. Let's go get Amarian Hampton from North Carolina. New England Patriots here at number 38 overall. This is where Emeka Egbuka stops, or should I say here, Emeka Egbuka, easy selection for me. Go get Emeka Egbuka and Will Campbell as your first two picks. Then we go on to the Chicago Bears here at number 39, and there's so many options available for this Bears football team. I just think they're in a position where it's BPA at this point. They really have a good roster from up and down. I still think offensive line, though, is an area that they need to go after, right? And it's something for the future. If nothing else, they need to continue to invest in. Joe Thuney into last year of his contract, Jonah Jackson. He is still under contract, but, once again, you could still look to add to that offensive line in general. I'm going to go and select. This is where it gets really interesting, because who do you want to go after? What type of offensive lineman? Like, I could see them going Ariante Urshri, maybe stick him inside the guard, or you could also play tackle with Donovan Jackson, same thing. And we're going to go ahead and take Donovan Jackson here, who I could see playing either left guard for them long haul or even left tackle. Like, he could compete over with Braxton Jones, and it just gives you some more depth on that offensive line and more firepower for injuries and things like that. And I feel like at this value to it makes a lot of sense. On to the New Orleans Saints here at number 40, first round. We win Jahdae Barron, one of the more interesting picks I think I've ever done for the New Orleans Saints. I think so. It's got to be up there. I'll play it that way. And in the second round, I am going to go ahead and take a look at bolstering this offensive line. I think that's the other big area that we're going to have to fill here. And there's still some really good offensive linemen available too. Let's go ahead and get Ariante Urshri. So Urshri could compete at the tackle position. I think you can slide him in right away at guard. So no matter how you shake it, let's go get a big monster offensive lineman for Kellen Moore, who knows a thing or two about a good big offensive line. I think Urshri would fit that bill big time. Bears back on the clock. We were just talking about the Bears. We went 2 offense picks. Let's go get some help on the defense now. I am going to go get some more help in the secondary now. And you know what is really interesting? I could see, this is a sneaky need for them, okay? What if they draft another cornerback? Look, I like Tyreek Stevenson. He's a good player. However, And Terrell Smith too, somebody don't rule him out either. Maybe, with the available players that are currently here, let's go take Siobhan Revel. It's something I've not done. Let me know what your thoughts are on that. And like I talked about earlier, their depth is a little thin. And going into contracts too, it would make sense to get a little younger, a little cheaper at the cornerback position. So that's why I'm going to go ahead and do that. And depending on, Kyler Gordon too, they could possibly move Stevenson around in the slot, and they could, figure out ways to play all of these guys. Like I said, I don't know. It's very interesting, isn't it? I'm trying to calculate this one in my head right now. On the Jets, though, we'll move on here. And for the Jets, first round, we went and got Armin Embu in the first. Now I think we need to either add interior defensive line. You know what? Receiver too is a big area that I need to add. So I like adding some receiver here. Maybe somebody with some size. Jaden Higgins, Trey Harris. Huge fan of Trey Harris. Jaden Higgins, Jack Besh, a lot of fun options here. Jalen Knoll would be a good option too, but I do want to add somebody with some size. I'm going to go get Trey Harris. You worry a little bit about the injuries, but I think he can be a true X outside wide receiver. So let's go get and fill that void for the New York Jets. On to the 49ers. We went at offensive line in the first round. We got to go with trenches, baby. Oh, that's what we're going to do. There's some edge rushers on the board that I like a lot. And that is what we're going to do right here. Let's go get Landon Jackson. Nick Gordon would be a good option too. There's a ton of available edge rushers still that are here. On to the Cowboys. Let's go get a wide receiver. Let's go get a weapon out here. I still think that's an area. Or running back too. Actually, let's take a look at the running backs because there's probably some really good ones and there are on the board. Yeah, let's go ahead and get Travion Henderson, shot out of a cannon Henderson. I think receiver would be an interesting one, but with something we just had a couple of receivers come off the board. Let's go get running back. I think that's maybe the better value at this point for the Dallas Cowboys. Sorry, let's get ahead of ourselves. You can see the board now. On to the Indianapolis Colts, who with their last pick, we got Colston Loveland, where I'm going to go add some more offensive line to this football team. I'm going to go get Jonas Savaiinaea, the right tackle at Arizona, and he could play right tackle for them for the future, but it adds more interior as well with Jonas Savaiinaea because I think he could slide right into that right guard position for them, and then Matt Gonzalez continue to be their swing tackle, long-term right tackle of the future, or Savaiinaea, and that way you got more competition and help fill the void by losing Will Fries. On to the Atlanta Falcons, and they got James Pierce Jr. As I mentioned, I still think it's their biggest need on the roster. Now let's go get a safety. All right, that's another big area. Who's going to be that guy next to Jesse Bates? Well, I'm going to go add in an elite ball hawk into that room, Xavier Watts. Woo! I love Xavier Watts. And the dude just doesn't have a whole ton of weaknesses. Maybe he's not an elite athlete, but he knows where the ball's going, and he makes plays over and over again. Arizona Cardinals now. We got Kenneth Grant in the first round, and with the second pick now, I still like adding another playmaker in that room. I do think it's something that they could look at adding. Jalen Knoll sticks out like a sore thumb, and that's a pinky thumb. There we go. Jalen Knoll is going to be my pick here for the Arizona Cardinals. And then on to the Miami Dolphins, where I'm looking at a couple of different positions. So guard, a big area that they need to look at. I think on the defense side, corner is a huge void. Safety, both big. Now, I think safety-wise, there's still some guys that we could address on later day two with their second or third. Well, it's an end of the second round pick. So there's still some guys that I feel confident in there and they can get by for right now. I'm going to go and go corner. The offensive line is still a big need. Absolutely. Maybe they find somebody between cornerback and offensive line in free agency. They got to find a couple of players there. But for right now, let's go ahead and add to that room. Let's go get a Zaria Thomas from Florida State, and opposite of Jalen Ramsey. They got to get younger. They got to get cheaper on that in that cornerback room. Bengals, first round pick, we went Shamar Stewart. And I'm adding a plug and play right guard with Tate Ratledge from Georgia. I was like, Tate Ratledge. I was just trying to ramp it up like Scooby-Doo. But he's going to plug in right away for Alex Kappa there with that loss and as your right guard starter. Seahawks with their second round pick at number 50. First round, remember, we went Kelvin Banks Jr. in that offensive line. With their second pick, I'm going to go add some more cornerback bolstering help there just because, look, I don't know, maybe Jeremiah Pritchard can step up and be that number two outside cornerback. I think adding Trey Amos certainly helps and allows Witherspoon to continue to play that slot cornerback role. And then Tariq Woolen, too, going last year of his contract. I'm not sure if he's going to get paid, so I think it makes sense to go get into the cornerback in the room. On to the Broncos at 51. First round, we got some offense. We traded up to go get Tyler Warren. Hey, it's worth it. Tyler Warren's an unbelievable player. It would be to continue to bolster that offense and get a high-powered running back. Like, that's something that this team does need to do, right? They need to get somebody that can make some big plays in that running back room. I'm going to go grab Quishon Judkins from The Ohio State University. Scatterboo would be fun, too. I'm not going to lie. Scatterboo is very tempting here, but I will go Judkins. Judkins is a guy that I think gives you a really powerful runner, right? He's extremely tough to tackle. And he's not maybe the long speed guy or anything like that, but he's got, decent speed, right? He's got 4.4 speed, still fast. And then going on to Seattle here at number 52, I talked about earlier. Let's go get a playmaker, right? We need another receiver in this room. That's where we're going to go add in Jaden Higgins, that outside deep threat. I mean, he wins consistently with his explosiveness. He blows by cornerbacks consistently. And he's not maybe DK Metcalf, but he certainly has good speed, great size, and a perfect help add for quarterback Sam Darnold. And then on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at 53, and I am going to go get a linebacker here. I think that they've got to invest in that position some more. Maybe Savonte Dennis can step into that number 2 role, but I do want to add more competition, and there's a lot of good linebackers available here. I'm going to go with Carson Swessinger, though, here. I change up my linebackers, I feel like, every single week. Swessinger, big time, it's maybe a one-year wonder sort of thing, but he got his opportunity. He made the most of it. He flies to the football. He's one of the quickest dudes when it comes to, I feel like his instincts, and he's got good zone instincts as well. On to the Green Bay Packers now with their second-round selection. Remember, first round we went Mikael Williams, the traits pass rusher with a lot of upside. Bagudu Kuntz, I'm sure, salivating. Let's go and add a weapon, though, in the second round, and I thought they were very much going to be in the play for DK Metcalf. Unfortunately, they did not get him. The Steelers did. I'm going to go get a weapon here, though, especially with that injury in Christian Watson. Let's go get Jack Besh. I think Besh is just one of the more safer receivers in this draft class who fits that profile of exactly what kind of the Packers look for, a tough-nosed blocker as well. At least he showed that at the Senior Bowl, and through his tape, he is a high motor guy as a blocker and as a route runner. He's got creativity and, can separate with his solid speed. He's more of a mover guy, especially for his size, and he got strong hands. That's why he just didn't drop anything, I feel like. Then we got into the Bolts at 55, and we got Matthew Golden in the first round. Let's go get some interior defensive line help, right? That is a big area that I feel like we need to address. And there's a lot of good football players still on the board here. I'm going to go ahead and go grab Shamar Turner from Texas A&M, a guy that I think will start to move up boards more and more. He is a guy that is going to get comped to a lot of different type of football players. I've seen Jeffrey Simmons out there. He plays with his hair on fire. And I'm not just talking about the penalties or anything like that, but his motor is freaking hot. He's always looking to hit dudes, but he's got crazy athletic traits. He just wasn't asked to really rush the passer a whole ton, especially Texas A&M. A lot of those guys on that defense line. Nick Gordon's another one of those guys I think so underrated right now. On to the Buffalo Bills now, 56. First round, we went Maxwell Harrison, the speedster, the playmaker in that secondary to go along with Christian Benford and Teron Johnson. Now, second round, I still think secondary safety is in play. Also, I would say offensive line here maybe at this point, too, is something we could look at, like a developmental. Remember, this offensive line, they use 6 offensive linemen quite a bit. Alec Anderson plays a lot as that 6 offensive lineman. They block. They're not afraid to go in their jumbo packages. So I'm going to do that. And David Edwards is going to last year of his contract. It makes sense to continue to invest in there. I will go with, I think Marcus Bowe, I think Anthony Belton would all be really good options. We'll go ahead and grab Anthony Belton since he plays on the left side. I think Bo would be a good idea. Wyatt Millam, you name it. There's some guys I think that'd be really nice selections too. But yeah, we'll go grab Belton. Super strong offensive lineman. Going to be a nice pass protector and run blocker. Oh. And then on to the New England Patriots. After this was the trade down pick that we got, formerly from the Carolina Panthers, that was formerly from the Los Angeles Rams. I got to make sure I got that right. And now after their picks, we got Will Campbell and Emeka Buka. I'm going to continue the BPA approach, and let's go grab some more edge talent. Yeah, you got Harold Landry. However, going in last year of his contract, still makes a lot of sense to go grab some more edge talent. Nick Gordon's available. I'm running to that one. That's an easy selection for me. Houston now at 58. We got Josh Connolly Jr. with their first-round selection, and now with their second-round selection, I'm going to go ahead and take a look at adding some more youth onto that defensive line. Still something that they need to do and focus at. Also, I mean, there's other areas like receiver. I get that. Maybe a tight end upgrade would make sense as well. But I'm going to add some more bolster into that pass rush on that defensive line. And we're going to go get a lot of good players on this defensive line still available. And we pick whatever. We'll go Omar Norman Lott from Tennessee. Lots of really good options. I'm not going to lie. And speaking of which, for the Baltimore Ravens, that's what I'm going to do here too. We went after Malachi Starks in the first round. Other areas that we could look at, too, is the offensive line. That's true. I mean, looking at guards, Marcus Bowe would be a nice option. You got some dudes available, Wyatt Millam, etc. I'm going to wait on that. Let's go ahead and improve the pass rush on the defensive line because that is something that I thought was a little too inconsistent in an area that they need to Adson bolster too. So I'm going to go ahead and TJ Sanders from South Carolina. Exactly what they need is another pass rusher on that front. Detroit Lions now on the clock here with pick 60. And remember, Kevin Zeiler, we still don't know just yet. And I do think Christian Mahogany can step up and be a starter. But at this point, Graham Glasgow, I almost want him to be a backup. So I'm going to draft another offensive lineman. Let's go get an interior guy here. You know what would be an interesting pick too? Jared Wilson would be a fun one, like a developmental center behind Frank Ragnow. I mean, he could also play guard. I don't think he's just a center-only guy either. Let's go and get Jared Wilson. I've not done that one before. I think he's going to go in this range as well, especially after the combine 4.84. So let's go ahead and it's something different for the Detroit Lions that I've not done. I do think it's an area that they could look at, especially with Frank Ragnow, some injuries and stuff like that, long haul. Washington Commanders, and he, like I said, he can still play guard for them. When we go on to the Washington Commanders, we got Donovan Ezeraku in the first round. And now let's go ahead and bolster up that secondary. Let's go get another outside cornerback. I am going to go get Darian Porter from Iowa State, an elite athlete. You pair him up with Marshawn Lattimore on the outside. You boom Mikey Sanders still into the slot. Hey, and they can figure it out. Like, I mean, Sanders still can play on the outside too, but we need to add more cornerback help, and we'll do that. Then we go into the Buffalo Bills. As I mentioned earlier, I still want to add a safety in here. Like, I still think that they need to have more competition. I like that they brought back DeMar Hamlin. You got Cam Lewis and Taylor Rapp still under contract for another season. So that's something like, yes, you got some guys, but let's try to add some more elite talent to go along with Cole Bishop. Winston can be that guy. I love Winston. And prior to injury, I think he could have been a first-round selection. Chiefs, we got Darius Alexander in the first round. I'm trying to figure out what to do with this offensive line. I'm not going to lie. I'm struggling a little bit with that scenario, but let's go add somebody. Let's go get Cameron Williams from Texas. And also like Ozzie Trapillo. I think Trapillo would be a really nice option too to develop there. But we'll go get, actually, you know what? Trapillo is interesting. I think Trapillo's tape is better than Cameron Williams, maybe even at this point. Charles Grant, that's a fun one too. But let's go and we'll change it up a little bit. Let's go with Ozzie Trapillo, right tackle over there at Boston College, a really good player. And then final pick of this mock draft, I just added in the third round, mainly because I was trying to make sure we get the trades right. See, a lot of the picks on the simulator aren't quite right, so I wanted to do that just to make sure I got the picks right. But the final pick for the Eagles here, and for them, we got Benjamin Morrison. I know that's a weird one. Sanders, what? What are you doing that one for? I'm going to go ahead and look at either the interior of the defensive line or a developmental right tackle. I've done this pick over and over again, but I do like Charles Grant a lot. However, let's change it up. Let's go ahead and get an interior defensive lineman. Let's continue to bolster that front there. And I'm going to go add in a big-time hog molly up in that front, Alfred Collins from Texas. And that will finish up our draft. Just doing a recap here, let's go from top to bottom in the first round. And we had some trades. We had a couple of trades in this draft class. So I want to do it slowly so you can see all these picks as we'll go through this, kind of like by 5 picks and whatnot. Let me know, like I said, on your thoughts and what you view. What would you do differently? We're starting to get a lot more clarity now that free agency is in the books, and it's going to continue to get more and more clarity as the weeks go by. It's never going to be perfect, of course. Like, there's always going to be some surprises when we get into the actual draft itself. But I do think that we're seeing a lot more clarity with some teams and some areas they're going to be looking at. And a lot of these teams, too, they're going to go into the draft, and it's like they don't have huge rocket voids that they have to fill. Like, there's like the Bears who have addressed a lot of the needs, and some of these teams like the Bills that, you're looking at future needs, too, and that's what teams are going to be looking at. So trying to balance BPA with future needs, with needs right now, and things like that. So, yeah, definitely let me know what you think about this draft. I hope you guys have a really good day, and I'll talk to you later.